Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another live broadcast of the Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network, tfrlive.com, where we give you protection from deception. I want to give a big shout out to everyone over in the Wookiee Cave in the chat room at tfrlive.com/chat. Everyone listening on iHeart and all of the various platforms out there. And for one time this week, we are simulcasting on KBS2 as well. And the reason for that is because it's going to be a really special occasion here. We're going to be getting into one of the subjects that, for me, has to be a personal favourite of mine. And I kind of came to this party later on than most. And Anne, my loving, loyal partner, will never let me forget that. And she's actually on night shift tonight. I want to give her a big shout out, because if it wasn't for her, I may never have got into something called the mystery of Oak Island. Now, I remember all the furore that was going on around this new TV show that had started on History Channel years ago. And I thought, yeah, looks all right. Don't know, maybe check it out. But I didn't. And I spent a couple of years not checking it out. But Anne was absorbing every minute of it. And then I must admit, once I checked it out, I was hooked. So tonight, yes, we are going to be talking about an island just off the coast of Nova Scotia in the North Atlantic, which is called Oak Island. And for the past 220 plus years, it has been the site of almost constant searching for what some believe to be a priceless treasure that lies at the bottom of something dubbed the Money Pit. Now, if you go back to the real start of all of this, you go back to 1795. And there was a gentleman by the name of Daniel McGinnes who one day went to hunt game over on an island that we all now know as Oak Island. And something really special happened that day, because when he was there, well, he noticed a big depression in the ground and what looked like pulleys and the remnants of some work that had been done there. And that's where I leave you, and that's where we set sail from tonight, as we try and uncover what lies beneath the surface of Oak Island. We're going to be getting into pirates, Freemasons, the Knights Templar, and more. We'll be going over various theories that exist as to just what went on there, just what may be there, and whether or not we're getting any closer to revealing the truth. And to help me do this tonight, I have got a good friend of mine, Scotty Lopez. He is here. But not only that, we also have, all the way from Nova Scotia in Canada, yes indeed, we've got somebody that goes by the name of Mr. McGinnis. Now, it might not be McGinnis, but we're going to find out all about that and a whole lot more with somebody who I think has probably got more of an inside scoop on what's going on Oak Island than most of us here tonight. So without any further ado, let me go to, first of all, Scotty Lopez. How you doing, man?
Hey, man, some Oak Island woo.
Oh,
Man.
yes, indeed, Scott. I am super excited, my friend. Super excited. And I know it's something we've spoke about umpteen times in the past, right? And I can't wait to get into this with somebody from almost ground zero, right? The scene of the crime, so to speak.
Yeah. This ought to be a very, very interesting conversation. And isn't it crazy how long the Oak Island series has been going on for? It doesn't really seem like it's been that long, really, but it has. It's been, how long has the show been running?
I think that was the end of the 7th season, I think.
Yeah,
I believe so, yeah.
like 6-7 years, something like that.
And in comparison, though, when you think about it, that 6 or 7 years not even 1% of the time that has been spent trying to uncover this mystery.
Exactly. You're right. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it really is a very, very short period of time that, you know, that they've been trying to uncover what was going on there. I mean, when you're doing that kind of work and you're doing that kind of sort of excavation and all of that stuff, 7 years really isn't that long. I mean, it takes a long time to get a lot of this stuff done. As far as I mean, the progress that they make, it takes a while to do. So um I can easily see this whole, you know excavation and digging and uncovering what's going on there. I mean, this is going to be possibly maybe even a multi-generational thing. I mean, we're talking about the two brothers that are doing this. Maybe their progeny will end up taking over after them and continuing the work. I mean, it's that big of an operation.
Well,
So
on that note, I think that's the perfect way to segue to tonight's special guest, because throughout the history of Oak Island, there does seem to have been almost this connection that draws families to it. And once they're there, they rarely leave. And of course, I started off this story about Oak Island in the year 1795 or thereabouts, when Daniel McGinnes was one of 3 young men who started in vain to try and excavate whatever on earth was under that island. And that McGinnis name, that family name, it's McGinnis, and I've got McGinnis here, but he goes by the name of Manny. And Manny is somebody who provided lots of joy for myself and the YouTube audience with his gnomes that he would send all the time. And we even had one. I'm sure there was one ready to be members emoji before we got demonetized, obviously. But Manny, you're somebody that has made a very long and lasting impression on me, Scotty, the KBS audience, and I can't think of somebody better to come on for what is actually one of our first real full shows as an Oak Island investigation. So welcome, my good friend.
Well, thanks for having me.
So,
Appreciate it.
I think the best place to start, and hopefully you've got time to spend the full show with us tonight, because I'm shameless and keep these guests when it's right into the topics I love, Scott. But how about you just tell the audience a little bit about who you are, as much as you're willing to tell, Manny, obviously, and your possible connection to all of this.
Well, obviously, I live here in Nova Scotia, and I've always been a real interested in history, because there's a lot of history. And when I was a kid growing up, we heard about the Oak Island story, especially with the fact that one of the discoverers was Daniel McGinnes, and we kind of had a little bit of a joke about that, because sometimes we'd say if it wasn't for McGinnis luck, we'd have no luck, kind of like bad luck. And because we always said that when he went to dig it up, he got the curse of Oak Island put on him and that kind of stuff. So we kind of use that as a bit of humor. But the whole idea of the fact that the McGinnises, and one of the things that a lot of people mention is the name, how it's spelled. But back in the 1700s, if you do a little research, you'll find out that a lot of people weren't that literate. And so their main concern was how to pronounce it. And so they ended up misspelling it, with MACINNES, or it could be MCINNIS. And in his case, it was MCG, and so on. So there's a lot of, different spellings, but it's basically all coming from the main clan, which was MACINNES, which is how I like to spell my name. So
did you get told these stories then? Did you hear about this early on in your life then? Was this part of the family lore?
Well, we heard about it, but as a kid, you kind of sort of don't pay a lot of attention to it.
Yeah.
To be really honest, when I first started really paying attention to it was I ended up having a family member that actually worked on Oak Island. and they worked there as basically a security guard for one of the dig companies. It was before the McGinnis, I believe. But anyway, and they started, filling me in on some of the stuff they were seeing in the museum and stuff. And of course, the McGinnis connection was brought up. And so when the show came out, that's when I went, oh, this is going to be good. So that's when I started really paying attention. And of course, every year it just gets better and better. And the theories and all the different mysteries associated with it. There's one thing for sure, is that the idea of Oak Island and the history associated with it has totally been changed for Nova Scotia. And, in a lot of ways for the discovery of North America, because, we all basically have been taught that Christopher Columbus discovered it. But based on what we're learning on the series and through different aspects of the history, it's a lot bigger than that. So it's exciting, for sure.
And it's exciting to have you here. It really, really is. I'm kind of actually honoured to have you on, because obviously the McGinnis family, whatever way you want to pronounce it, all the same stock as you've just explained there. And I was explaining to Scott before the show, the same things going on over here. There's Max and Mix, and it ends up, when you trace far enough back, it's exactly like Manny is saying. And I remember in one of the seasons, I may be wrong, I think it's season 4, there was a couple of McGinnis descendants on the show. And what they brought with them was absolutely amazing. And I'll get you to speak to that, Manny, because after we kind of get into what they showed, Rick and Marty Lagina, that still remains in the family, I've got an obvious question to ask you. So how about you tell the audience about what it was that they took to Oak Island to show Rick and Marty and the rest of the team?
Is that you referring to the cross?
Yes, I certainly am, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay, just had to make sure I was on the right track. So the fact that they had that in their whole family for all that time, and then show up at the island with that, I mean, that you could tell just by watching the episode, it blew the Lagina's mind. And and then of course it's just it never stops. It just, one thing leads to another. And I'm not sure exactly where the McGinnises that showed up on the show were from. But in the understanding that I had in the history of the clan, is that some went to the States, which we know Daniel McGinnes, he ended up in North Carolina. And he ended up having to come to Nova Scotia because he was a loyalist for the crown. And because he was a loyalist, he had to get out of the U.S. because they basically won their independence from Britain. So he ended up in Oak Island, and there's stories about the fact that he was a teenager when he found the Depression, but he was actually about 37 years old. So he was older than they thought. But there's more to uncover all the time. So looking forward to seeing how the new season coming down the pike is going to pan out.
So when you were getting told the stories, and to add to that, what we were showing on Oak Island, a very intricately woven gold cross that they claim was handed down from Daniel. Now, I have to ask you the obvious question before we get going anywhere. Did you have any stories of a great treasure being found by them at the time? Because it is relevant, because nobody really knows if anything's still at the bottom of the money pit or what's been found over the years. So what were you kind of told about it?
We were told essentially that there was like something found, but they didn't disclose exactly what they found. It kind of kept it secret because, well, if you're smart and you find a treasure, you don't tell everybody, because then everybody shows up looking for something. But we never did find out if it was just, a rumor or just part of the whole, everybody wants to be first to tell a story, but the idea was it was about 3 chests that were found, and then that got put off somewhere. But who knows? I mean, it's like anything. It's you start a rumor and you tell 10 people, it changes so much.
It's quite
by the time you get
interesting
to it.
because on the island, from time to time, there's a metal detecting expert called Gary Drayton. And
Yeah.
he's a heck of a character. I love him with bits, but he finds these things, and it's a good one. He calls it a Bobby Dazzler and puts
Yep.
it in the top pocket. But from time to time, they have found what looks like the remains or the remnants of iron strapping. The kind of people picture your stereotypical pirate's chest, the black kind of hinges that are on it.
Right.
And
The sea chests.
yeah, there's been a number of like items that you could say are similar to what we see there, and they've been found on the island, which now, let me obviously say, back in that time, people move into the area like Manny's been explaining here, and we had people in 1759 as well, a big influx of settlers to the area. So chests carry things. I get that. It doesn't prove anything, but it does lend some support to the possibility that maybe a number of chests have been found over the years. And I was saying to you before the show, Manny, I wonder if maybe a couple of chests were left almost as a deterrent to make people, any searchers, think, aha, we found the loot, now we're out of here, kind of
Stop
thing, you know?
looking. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Be kind of like a distraction.
Yeah.
Famous. What do you call it? It's like magicians do. They distract you with this hand while they're doing something with this hand. So they could have left a chest or two just to, oh, we found it, and then they move on, and the real treasure's still far below.
And Scotty, I mean, what's your take on the whole story of Oak Island before we drill into, more specifics? Pardon the pun.
I think there's multiple layers of history on that island, and you can't just chalk it down to one thing. I think that there's a much older mystery that needs to be uncovered and sort of solved, like a much older puzzle, that dates back, to like the Templars and stuff like that. But then on top of that, I think that there's like another layer of history where we're talking about pirates and hidden treasure and all of that. So I think we're just talking about a multifaceted mystery, and we're seeing that as it plays out in the show, right? I mean, we're seeing these different layers of history being uncovered. You're having stuff dated back to the 12th century, all the way up to like the 17 and 1800s. So it just sounds like there's just been this massive amount of activity that has occurred on the island, and they're just coming across all this stuff. So I mean, I don't know. I'm obviously, I think we're really interested in what this really old sort of initial activity on the island was all about. Talk about the Vikings. I totally believe the Vikings were there, long before Christopher Columbus, supposedly discovered the New World, right? I mean, we already see
Discovered, the air quotes up, discovered.
Yeah, air quotes.
Same as
but
Zuckerberg created Facebook.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, we already see examples of Viking activity in North America. I mean, they've found stones with runic carvings, in the Northeast and up into areas of Canada and stuff like that. So it's there was obviously activity and people traveling to North America long before they, the supposed discovery. So it's just it's interesting. I'm really fascinated on what really lies down there at the bottom of that thing. I think that's where that initial sort of old history resides, and they're just kind of uncovering more of the more recent history, if you want to call it that. The stuff from the 1700s, the 1800s. When they're finding Spanish coins and
Well,
stuff like that.
before we go to the break, then, let me lay out a bit of a timeline for people. And since we're talking about Oak Island, I think we'll treat this show like an archaeological dig. And right now we're basically just staking out the area. We're just mapping it out. We're just surveying it. We're just looking where we're going to dig our first hole after the break. But today I went and done some digging again. And
I dig it.
yep, it's going to happen all night. It's going to happen. I can tell it's not even going to be forced. It's just going to occur. But
Don't stump me, though.
I went back today, and I don't often do the deep dives like I used to, but again, I love this topic so much, and I got as far back as 1497, and somebody called John Cabot was the first European there, and he claimed that piece of land for England. Now we move forward from there over 100 years to 1602. To 1614, and that was the career of a pirate called Peter Easton, and he was based on an island called Oderin in Newfoundland. In 1604, Samuel de Champlain established Port Royal in the Bay of Fundy, and it's the first French claim to Nova Scotia. 1605, the Acadians settle in Nova Scotia. 1632, the French establish La Have settlement at the entrance to Mahone Bay. 1670, privateer Harry Morgan sacks the city of Panama. Great treasure they sacked from there. Big bounty, big loot, only never accounted for. Now, when I say privateer, we were laughing about this before the show, because basically that's just a government-sanctioned pirate. That's all it is. That's all it is. So we come forward to 1680, and then we have the infamous pilot, William Kidd. And 1687 to 94, privateer William Phipps. And he went on to actually sack Port Royal in 1690. In 1685, we had a movement of French people coming over during the Huguenot persecution. To Nova Scotia they arrived. And in 1700, and this is really interesting, the French governor at the time, he actually sent out an invite to pirates and said, "Oh, come forth, come hither. Oh, you pirates, you come here, you set up a nice base, and you bring your bounty and you pay us our French stuff, and we give you frog's legs or whatever we give you, right?" And they done a deal. So basically, you had a heap of pirates that were given a safe haven right up in the waters, in and around, off the coast of Halifax, Nova Scotia now, and of course, Oak Island. So then you've got in 1713, the French build Louisbourg Fortress, and 32 years later, the Brits, they sacked it, and they took it over. Now in 1746, a year later, somebody called Donville, he set sail with a fleet from France to take back Louisbourg, but because of scurvy and things at the time, and a lot of ships being lost, that kind of failed. 1759, there was an influx of settlers from New England, and Chester was established. 1763, seen the Treaty of Paris. I think that was the Brits and the French. They were kind of stopping fighting for once. And in 1765, the Surveyor General of Nova Scotia designated an island just off the coast as island number 28. And that would later go on to be known as Oak Island. Now in 1788, the Vaughan family move into the area. They become significant in the story. And in 1782, we had somebody called Samuel Ball, who had fought with the English, much like McGinnis had done, and he moved to Oak Island and bought one of what he would end up with 9 lots. Not bad for a black man on the run and basically no money and a cabbage farmer. We'll come back after the break because we're getting close to where the money pit was discovered, and we're going to dig down deeper. We'll be right back. And we're still on YouTube, obviously, everyone. We're still here. So, yes, indeedy. So what's it like being a McGinnis that like in close proximity to Oak Island? Do you not get a stirring to go and join the Laginas or have a dig for yourself, man?
That'd be great. Go down to the Mug and Anchor.
You know, we're going to talk about them later in the show, but your thoughts on the Laginas just now, because I've said before, and I think you agree with me, I think they truly are in it for all the right reasons, and they're doing it with the utmost of respect, which I think they should get a lot of credit for. But what do you think?
It's funny when I first found out that these two didn't know who they were, but I found out it was a U.S. company coming to Oak Island. I wasn't very hopeful, but as we've gotten to know them through the show and through the community, they're so respectful, and I honestly believe that they really want to discover the mystery of Oak Island, and it's more than just the gold, because anybody that knows anything about the lore associated with Oak Island, I think it's much more than a chest of gold. There's something far more important there than that.
And
because
we're definitely
it's a whole lot of effort for that, right?
Oh, it's like, you know, for anyone who hasn't seen this, you know, you're talking about elaborate flood tunnels. You're talking about booby traps. You're talking about, basically, think of Indiana Jones, like something like that. Some adventure Indiana would have to go on to actually crack all of the puzzles and the pitfalls and everything that's involved in trying to even get close to what's down there. And we'll talk about the various searchers and the searches that have happened over the years. And we'll also look forward to what is going to be one of the most massive operations, in my mind anyway. I'm sure it must be the most massive of operations. We won't get into it right now, but we'll do it on the show. And I tell you, I think, like Manirus said there, I think, Scott, that I'll put the... I need to put the alert box on. We've got a super chat coming in. I think, the Laginas are absolutely in it for all the right reasons. Thank you, man.
Go Manirus, go brother. Great stuff.
Oh, he's an absolute natural, isn't he? He's got that cool Canadian accent going on as well, man. I love that. There's a guy in the show called Carmen Legg. He's like the ironsmith that they go to. I tell you, man, he has got they even put subtitles over here when he's talking. He doesn't need them. It's a cool accent. It's strong. I thought it was a bit cheeky that they gave him subtitles. But then again, they do that for Scottish people as well. So, hey, go figure.
That's true. Yeah.
And of course, I've been to Nova Scotia. I have been to an island off the coast of Nova Scotia in the North Atlantic, Scott. I have. I landed there on my way to Florida with the army, and we stayed a night in Halifax. And we also landed there on the way home as well, because when you were in one of those big transport Hercules type planes, you ain't making it all the way over the Atlantic in one shot. So you would go to Iceland first, and then we went to Canada, and then down to Florida, and the reverse on the way back. So at the time, though, get this, Scotty boy, I'd never heard of Oak Island, dude. Never heard of it. I'd no appreciation for where I was. Here we go, we're coming back.
Okay.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, we're digging for truth tonight. We're drilling down. We're getting to the bottom of the money pit. It's an Oak Island special right here on the Kev Baker Show to celebrate the finale of the latest season of The Curse of Oak Island. And I would love to give a big shout out to the team at History. You know, producer Kevin Burns, the Laginas, and all of the team that work with them as well. They've even got one of the Blankenship family. That's a family that's synonymous with Oak Island. We'll get into them as we go on. You know, they've kept as many of the old timers that are basically around still today in the picture. And I really can't credit them and give them enough credit for the work they're doing there. And it's nice to hear somebody local in the area, Manirus, and he was sharing with us during the break that, you know, they were at first, you know, met with some kind of caution. Bunch of Yanks coming in to look for treasure. But over time, and I think the way they come across on the show is just the way they are, absolute gentlemen, and probably a real positive effect for the entire community, I would imagine. You know, they've built the visitor centre on Oak Island, they're running tours. They're certainly not doing it for selfish reasons. And the money pit for no other reason, you could call it that, just with the money that they have thrown down there themselves. And they are millionaires. They do have, you know, other interests, businesses. This has been a lifelong thing for them. They fell in love with the story back in the day, and it's a passion. And they've already got money. They've got great wealth. It's not about the treasure. It's more about the story. It's about the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, as Rick likes to say all the time. And boots on the ground, as he likes to say. And that's something we say here on the show when we go to places like Ukraine, when we had Alex on, and when we go to people in the countries where things are going on, it's boots in the ground. Probably stole that subconsciously from Oak Island. But we'll get back into the timeline. I've only got a little bit to go to take us up to where 1795 and Manny, our special guest, his family become really, really relevant in this. So in 1782, I was telling you, an ex-slave that went to fight for the British, he ended up settling in Nova Scotia. Now, he eventually bought one of the lots on Oak Island. His name's Samuel Ball. And he was a humble cabbage farmer with hardly a penny to his name. Yet somehow, he ended up with 9 lots and one of the richest and quite influential characters in Nova Scotia at the time. Not bad for an ex-slave, right? You got to wonder, where did that wealth come from? But then in 1784, this is when Daniel McGinnes and the family move into the area. And in 1786, John Smith, another name that is very important in this story, he also moves into the area. 1787, and that's when Samuel Ball literally moved into the first lot at Oak Island. So he spent 5 years in Nova Scotia, saved up, bought a lot, and then all of a sudden amassed 9 of them. 1788, the Vaughans, they were given permission by the government to start cutting pine trees on the mainland. And then it jumped forward to 1795. And Daniel McGinnes went to go hunting, found something, then went back to the mainland and got John Smith and Anthony Vaughan. And that is the time, or the day, when the money pit, as it's now known, was found. And from what I can make out, Manny, Scott, what Daniel seen that day was a depression in the ground, a pulley slung over a tree, looked like there'd been some massive works going on there, and that, of course, encouraged him to start digging. Is that how you know it, Manny?
Yes, it's exactly how we heard about it. Is it basically they were out looking around, exploring the island, and they seen the depression and noticed the branch of the tree with a block and tackle on it, and they figured something's afoot. And they started digging around, and that's when they realized that they stumbled on something that was more than, they should have been there, because there was really, I don't think at the time there was nobody on the island. It was just there. So for it to be so not evident that there had been such a big dig, if you will, on that island, it kind of points to the fact that it happened a long time before. Yeah, a long time before. So starts the story of Oak Island.
A long, long time before, when you think about it, because you're talking about, when you think that the trees, I'm thinking of the trees, and it takes you to the swamp and things like that. I mean, these trees must have been growing back or growing for some time before.
Yeah, it would have been hundreds of years.
Exactly. And I mean, we've got scientific testing and thing that's been done, and there is wood that's come out of the bay where you could suppose any kind of ship may have landed, and you can speculate it might have been some kind of wharf, a pier, something like that. But when they dated that, That takes us right back to the 1700s, right when we're, well, before the McGinnises and before there's supposed to have been anything on the island, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Crazy. Crazy, crazy, Scott.
This timeline you have pulled up here on the that very first initial thing is pretty interesting. What's it say? Two
Yeah.
fishermen disappeared while looking into strange lights coming from Oak Island.
Yeah.
That's a
Now
bit of woo right there.
Exactly. Now, this was another timeline I came across today. oakislandmystery.wordpress.com. And it's got a really kind of thorough timeline that takes you up to 1987. But like Scott said there, it starts off in 1720. Now, that's 75 years before the McGinnises ever, or McGinnis ever went there and started digging. And two fishermen disappeared while looking into strange lights coming from Oak Island. So that would
Yeah, so
definitely
there's
suggest, Scott, there's something happened there, and whoever was there didn't want them telling the tale of what was going on.
Yeah, it's definitely like an added layer of woo. And what if there was nobody there? What if we're talking about some UFO sort of woo kind of activity or something coming from the island? I mean,
Lopez went woo, deep woo, early.
hey, I'm just gonna
Well-
throw it out there. I mean, look, uh, you know, when you know, we were just talking about, you know, when McGinnis showed up over there, and by all accounts, nobody was on the island. The island wasn't inhabited by anybody or anything like that. It was just an empty island. So why would there be strange lights emitting from the island? Just a couple of years before. Well, not a couple of years, but just it's still the 1700s. 1720. So I mean,
what do you think then, Manny? What do you make of that?
I was just going to say, just to go a little more woo. My wife watches the show, and a lot of times when the beginning of the show happened, she's very what's the word to use? Esoterically tuned. And so when the show was starting out, and they were talking about different places they wanted to explore, of course, the swamp was sort of. Rick wanted to do it, Marty hated it, and she always said, the answer is in that swamp. She says, I don't know why, but it's there.
That's what Anna said from the start as well.
Right from the beginning, yeah. And it's funny because, like you just mentioned about the lights on the island, that seemed to draw those individuals over to check it out. Maybe the island was picked for a particular reason. Maybe there was a point to picking the location and putting the effort into it. And, we talk about the curse of Oak Island and all the superstition around it. But, for people to spend all that effort and all that time, literally hundreds of years before that was discovered again, there has to be something big there. And in order to protect that, it wasn't uncommon, for people to call on otherworldly things to try to protect the area. So it might be warded. It might be something might be bound there. There's all kinds of things you can get into when it comes to the wooish theories.
Absolutely, brother. And there's people saying, how big is this island? I mean, it's not big at all. It's quite small, in fact. And when you look at it, I've always said it looks like an elephant. It's got a kind of nose on it. It's pareidolia, People will see it in certain ways. And for me, there's a part of me wonders if it was two separate islands at one point. And I'm certainly not the first to say that. But this swamp, and it's a triangle-shaped swamp. And this has become the focus, like you were saying there, of the search this season. And it's funny because talk about synchronistic. My missus as well. Again, she's going to have steam coming out her ears. I'm speaking to you today, Manny, about all of this. She really is. But I mean, she's always been adamant. She's like, get into the swamp. And it was a man called, what was it, Fred Nolan?
Oh, yeah.
Fred Nolan. Now, Fred Nolan was somebody who spent most of his life on the island. And he was obsessed with, and he was convinced as well, that on top of the great engineering operation that had obviously been there and being a surveyor, he could see how rocks had been used as markers, and he basically plotted them all out, discovered something called Nolan's Cross, very Templarish, but he was convinced, you know, it's definitely in the swamp. Now, back in the day, I mean, you're going back decades now, the technology they had in that time to do what they try to do now, or what he was trying to do back then, it just wasn't possible. You know, you couldn't get to the bottom of the swamp to find out what was going on. But I tell you, he did pull out big marker posts, and there's been more of those found this season, which suggests that there was an engineering or a surveying operation, Scott, in the swamp.
I'm curious, Kev. If you click the satellite view down in the corner right there, or in the bottom, yeah. If we're able to see any sort of
But bear in
feature,
mind we're on radio here as well, so we're kind of
yeah.
looking at Oak Island here, folks, or we're going to be in a moment.
But you know, I mean, it you know, with the detail of Google satellites these days,
Yep, there
we
it
might
is, the money pit.
see some, yeah, see
Now,
some
again, if
interesting.
you're at home, you can get onto this on Google Maps. It's the triangle-shaped swamp.
Yeah, there's the swamp, and um, yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, it is interesting too. I mean, you bring up the swamp because my mom as well said that there's more to the swamp. You know, so um, I definitely think the swamp holds the key to something. I think there's something big in the swamp as well, not just the money pit. Um,
Isn't it interesting that it's in the shape of a pyramid with the eye of Providence or Ra top of it?
Now, Manny, could you get closer to your microphone? It's a bit quiet. You were fine at the start, but now it's gone a
How's
bit
that?
quiet.
Is
Yeah,
that better?
so what were you saying there? Sorry, brother.
I was just saying, isn't it interesting that the shape of the swamp is the shape of a pyramid with the eye of Providence or eye of Ra on the top of it, and yet, you know, after all those years, if it was, and it seems to be indicated that it was man-made. Even the gentleman from the university that was checking the dating to do with the wood and stuff, I mean, he's pretty well come out and said that it's man-made.
Yeah, this season they've dried up a bit of the swamp. They're excavating it, and beneath the surface, now that they're getting to look what's there, they had felt stones previously, like that they thought they were maybe in kind of arranged stones, but you could never see anything. So this season they've got into it. They've got a digger in there. They're excavating it, and they've brought in Dr. Spooner from one of the local universities, who is somebody that's I believe he's a geologist. He's an expert in like glacial shift and things like that. And you know, if this was all natural, then you would be able to see that in the sediment and the samples that they took. The reason they excavated it in the first place was because last season he says, listen, there's parts of this swamp I can't explain the cores. It doesn't look like anything I've seen. And long story short, they then got biological material, an old piece of tree that shouldn't have been in there anyway. How can trees grow in swamps? That doesn't make sense. And they dated that because you can date wood with dendrochronology. And it takes you back to, and bearing in mind I started the timeline in 1497, something like that? Yeah. 1497. This takes you back to the 1200s. Now, if this biological material had got caught in between the normal ground and then the rocks that were placed on top, then that's a pretty solid way of dating when that happened. It's pretty scientific. I get it. And then it makes you wonder then. Sure, there was
Yeah, go ahead.
On
Sorry.
you go, man. No, on you go.
No, I was just going to say, it certainly made the guy from, I think he was from Acadia University,
Yeah.
the professor. It made him like he was shocked because I think he was looking to find a more reasonable explanation when he came back and had to reveal that to the McGinnis. He was surprised, and of course, so was the McGinnis.
And here's the thing, because if this is man-made, as we're suggesting, and like Manny said, there's an eye to it, and it's the eye of providence, or what some people would call the Illuminati eye. I would kind of associate it with the Freemasons. Then this is where we start to get into some of the characters that may or may not be a big part in the story, because Manny, Scott, there's a lot of evidence on this island, be it stones, be it connections to France, and the Templar kind of stuff as well. There's a whole lot of like Freemason, Templar kind of connections that you can definitely make on this island. And Manny, I'll come to you first, right? Because I'm going to trigger the audience here, Scott.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. It's best to talk about Masonic subjects when you have somebody who knows what they're talking about. And Manny, you yourself are a Freemason. My stepdad, he's a Freemason. I don't think you ever leave. It's like the CIA. They don't ever let you go. I'm only joking. But he's listening just now. He's enjoying this as well.
Oh,
and
good.
Charles Barkenship, one of the people on the show, he often wears his cap with his G and the cross and the compass and things, very proudly a Mason. What is it with the Masons in Oak Island? What, aside from your family connection, what did the Brotherhood tell you about Oak Island?
Well, until I didn't become a Mason until like 2008. And until I actually, it's funny because the draw for me for the Masonic interest was historical. I really love the history and how all of that is tied together. And with the Oak Island connection, when I started hearing bits and pieces, and Charles Barkhouse, who's on the show, I started asking other Masons in Nova Scotia, and it really, nobody says a lot. So if there's anything to whether or not the local Nova Scotia Masons are keeping a secret in regards to Oak Island, no one's told me. So I think we're going to all be surprised, including those who are affiliated with the Freemasons in Nova Scotia, because we watch it and we marvel at the connections between regular Nova Scotia history and of course the Masonic history, and you bring in the Templar connection. I mean, for me, that's a huge part of the mystery that I want to see some answers for. And you can't, I mean, what are the odds of finding that lead cross and then in Nova Scotia on a beach? It was in Smith Cove, I believe it was. And then they take it to France and it matches a carving on a wall.
Yeah, now I'm going to show that, and I'm going to post it in the TFR chat room as well, because this is a really strong connection for me anyway. And it was a lead cross that was found by our good friend Gary Drayton. This was a total Bobby Dazzler, right in the top pocket. Him and Rick, I remember it well. They were just down right at the water's edge. They got a good kind of signal on the metal detection, and they dug up this lead cross. Now, when they got it tested, I might be wrong here, but did it not go back to like the 1200s, 1300s as well? Or was it even earlier than that?
I think it was the 12th century.
Yeah, 1300s. And then what happened subsequently was, in the show, that they love to do the research. It's like I was telling you, it's the who, the what, the where, the when, the why. They always talk about it. It's cool. And obviously they go to France because of the Templar connections. And in fact, they're given a map by an author, she's now passed, called Zena Halpburn, that we'll take a look at later on in the show. And it was written in French. So they had this kind of French connection that they were looking into. And they went to somewhere called Dom Castle in France, which was where the Knights Templar were held as prisoners after, Friday the 13th, Black Friday, when they're all rounded up and persecuted before whatever happened to them happened to them. And obviously some escaped, but this castle, it showed you where they had been imprisoned. And on the wall, and it was the most uncanny thing because even the angle of the kind of top of the cross, near enough, it's almost like they used it as a template for what is carved into this castle. So I think this is one of the most significant finds, and it definitely ties activity from Europe because when they're testing where this lead came from, they say chances are mine in Europe somewhere, and it ends up being discovered all these hundreds of years later under stones on the beach at Oak Island. I mean, if that isn't proof that there was at least people kicking around or need for further investigation, even away from any money pit discovery. Imagine somebody just found that, guys.
Yeah.
That would be enough to go, well, we could change history here because this is like an out-of-place artifact.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the cross, I believe, is the oldest oldest thing that they have found on the island, if I'm correct. And um, I mean, to me, that definitely suggests Templar activity. I mean, I really, really believe that, when we're talking about this older history, this older puzzle that needs to be solved on Oak Island, I like to ascribe to the whole Templar thing. I think that there was Templar activity on the island, and there's something hidden there that the Templars put there. What is it? That's the question. That's the big question. And are we talking about some artifact that may have been in their possession, that was acquired through the Crusades? That's a possibility. And then we have to start getting into the woo of stuff like, the Ark of the Covenant, or something along that lines, some kind of a holy artifact or ancient artifact that was in their possession that they wanted hidden away, for so nobody could find it. I think that's where the real stuff is. And then, like we said earlier, I think there's that additional layer, maybe the Viking layer, then the pirate layer,
Well, what we'll do after the
Right.
break then, Scott, right? Since we're on this now, we've got 12 things, 12 kind of theories that have been put out there about what the treasure may or may not be. And we'll take a look at that. And then, before we go to the break, Queen Goddess, somebody who's very dear to me, another one of our audience, love her take on things. And she's saying that this actual cross here, or what we're calling a cross, it appears in Egyptian hieroglyphs as well, and it's called an ankh. Now, you might think, well, hang on though, that's the Templars. How would they have been doing that? Well, also on the wall in this actual prison, there is symbols and signs, and some of which they say looks like the tree of life from the Kabbalah. Now, you got to remember, when the Knights Templar ended up getting kind of went from being almost like up at the top level of society in Europe at the time, they were idolized, and friends with royalty. They were literally the Knights of Christ. And then all of a sudden, their fall from grace, I think it was King Louis at the time, whoever it was, and we had the night of when they were all rounded up and we had some imprisoned. Jacques de Molay, he was the Grand Master, I think, of them at the time. And they said that they were practicing satanic stuff and witchcraft and woo. And then when you find that they did carve in things from the Kabbalah in the walls, arguably the Kabbalah, in the walls of a French kind of prison, then for me, Egyptian hieroglyphs, it could well be there. It suggests a knowledge that they came across. What did they discover under the Temple of Solomon? What was it that they brought back to Europe with them that gave them that power in the first place? And what was it that made them so determined to run away and flee to Scotland, build Rosslyn Chapel, hide something there, and then did they go to Oak Island? But what if they only went to Oak Island because when they were in France, you know who else hung out with the French? Only the Vikings. Oh, so maybe they were going chasing something or they knew of a special vault. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Ship and regulation is becoming an ever-growing problem in today's modern media. From the mainstream...
It certainly is, Mr. Chris Geo. I like that public service announcement there from Chris. That was awesome. But guys, I am absolutely loving this tonight. And for the first time in 1,290 episodes, 1,298, sorry, my stepdad, the Mason, funny handshakes, loving this show. Need I say any more, Scott? You know, it's a Masonic thing, Oak Island. I'm going to get my coffee. I'll leave you two guys in the hot seat.
Yeah, so you know, we talk about this this Templar connection, and you know, well, you know, we look at these carvings, and you know, people in the chat pointed out that cross also, you know, is seen in you know, Egyptian hieroglyphs as the Ankh, and yeah, I mean, you got to wonder, you know, they're going over to Jerusalem, you know, they're going over to the Middle East, they're going to that area of the world, you know, during the Crusades, and they're picking up a lot of that knowledge.
Yeah, because they would have been exposed to that for sure.
Yes, yeah. So they're picking up this knowledge of a lot of that, you know, ancient Egyptian knowledge, you know, the Kabbalah, you know, all of that stuff from the Middle East. They're picking up on, and then they're bringing it back with them. And like Kev said, you know, they were then accused of being, you know, heretics and, you know, blasphemous. And,
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah. It'd be because they're kind of dabbling in other things as well, you know, picking up other knowledge. So yeah, I mean that could be what that cross represents, maybe a much deeper, older sort of knowledge that they came across. You know, that just suggests, you know, hey, you know, maybe they did come across something. Yeah, like Kev said, what did they find in the Temple of Solomon? You know, what were a lot of these artifacts that maybe they had in their possession that could hold some kind of power or something like that. So it's very, very fascinating, and it looks like a lot of this stuff goes a lot deeper and older than I think, you know, we can really realize. You know, it's wild.
The mentioned about the Nolan's Cross. When you take the Nolan's Cross stones that they have found, and you take the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, it matches up pretty good.
Now, I'll get you to cover that when we
connection.
come back after the break, Manny.
Sure.
Where because that's really interesting, and I think that is a big piece of the puzzle. And there's so many pieces of this puzzle, and you have to wonder, you know, over the years, you know, through maybe no fault of anyone, just searchers, companies that have come and gone, you know, you wonder how many things have been moved that maybe were relevant. You know, may well have been markers to whatever was going on there. And we're about to go back to the network now, but I'll be telling you what's coming up later on in the week on the Kev Baker Show as well. It's shaping up to be an absolutely fantastic week here, as you're going to find out in just a moment. And of course, after the Kev Baker Show finishes, TFR Live, it's 24/7. They've got their live stream on YouTube as well. Check that out. So here we go. Let's go back to the network. Welcome back. Hour number 2 on a show that I'm super excited about. I'm stoked. I'm like a kid on Christmas Eve. I really am. And that's because we are getting into the mystery of Oak Island. It's something that I would be fascinated in, whether I had a podcast or not. It's going to be one of the most interesting, kind of mysterious, curse-filled, woo topics and locations that exist on the planet today. It's equal with any other mysterious location that I can think of. And we still haven't really uncovered the truth about what went on there and just what may still lie beneath. And before the break there, Scott was getting into the Templars, things like that. I was kind of connecting dots that may or may not exist with Vikings and French people as well. But I'd also mentioned something called Nolan's Cross. And because I'm super excited, we're going here, there, everywhere. And some parts of this are so significant, and I think Nolan's Cross is. And Manirus, Nolan's Cross, Fred Nolan, one of the major parts of the story in the 1900s, the 20th century. His boy now, he's actually a part of the team that are doing the current search. But talk to the audience about the significance of Nolan's Cross.
Well, we were saying during the break about how the Templars, when they went to different places, obviously during the Crusades and that, they would have been exposed to a lot of different cultures and belief systems. And when you take, for example, the Nolan's Cross imagery and you look at it and you see where the stones are placed, it is such a match for the Tree of Life and the Kabbalah. And that particular symbol is very esoteric. It represents a lot of energies, if you will. So, your point you mentioned where you said, with people coming in over the years, you wonder about if they might have moved something that shouldn't be there, because they weren't paying too much mind to things. I was reading earlier about the 90-foot stone, how that ended up at a bookshop. Of course, we've seen that in the show, and they were using it to beat on it for shaping leather. So they weren't really thinking ahead about the historic relevance of the stone. So, on Oak Island, the Nolan's Cross stones, I mean, you wonder how much they were moved or not preserved in their original location.
Manny, you mentioned there the 90-foot stone. Mm-hmm. Now, that takes us to the Money Pit. And this is, of course, where McGinnis and Vaughan and Smith, they done the initial excavation. Now, from what I can make out, they went down 10 feet, 3 meters, and they hit a platform of cut logs. They went down another 10 feet, 3 meters, more logs on our platform. They went down again. And now, did they stop at 30 feet? Is that when they decided we need to get more people involved here? The Truro company, they end up coming on board. Or sorry, was it the Onslow company to start with? One of the two, anyway. But the whole thing with the 90-foot stone, talk to the audience about that, because that is, again, I watched the one with the bookshop, and I've seen also this season when they dug up somebody's garden. I'm not sure if they were just wanting their garden dug up or not, but they didn't locate the stone. But that's another huge piece of the story that may or may not exist, right?
Well, it's interesting because the 90-foot stone, when they did get to it and they removed it, that's when they realized, we just did something we shouldn't have. It was a booby trap. And that's when it triggered the flood system that had been built so well to preserve whatever they were trying to dig to. But that stone, there's a timeline of what happened with that stone. And it went from Oak Island went to Truro, went to Halifax, it went to the bookshop. It ended up actually in someone's chimney, part of their chimney. And when the chimney was dismantled, then it went back to the bookbindery. And I mean, this stone has been translated, and a lot of people are wondering, if the translation was correct. But it was the trigger. It was the trigger for the flood tunnels. So you got to scratch your head and say, like, how? I mean, when you think about technology today, I honestly don't think if they set out today to build what's there on Oak Island, they couldn't do what's there. They couldn't do it. And just makes you wonder how and what knowledge did they have? What knowledge?
Exactly. That's the thing that always blew my mind, was the fact that they engineered these booby traps and these flood traps. I mean, whatever they are hiding down there, I mean, they really went through a lot of effort in order to keep people from getting to it, and I mean the level of engineering, like you said, Manirus, that they went through in order to do this. I mean, what is it that is so important that they were willing to go through all of this in order to keep it a secret? Um, it is. I mean, it's just it's far beyond just, oh, I'm gonna dig a hole and bury something in a hidden place. Um, they went through this whole thing of really trying to do everything possible to keep somebody from getting to it. And I mean, they've done a pretty damn good job, because look, we're in the 21st century with modern technology and we still haven't gotten down there.
No.
So I mean, that gives you an idea of the level of sophistication that they
And that,
involved in it.
yeah, and that's why I think the Masonic connection dovetails into that, because the ancient stonemasons, I mean, they could look at the structures they built in Europe. I mean, that took a lot of knowledge, that took years to learn, and it usually was generational. If it was family lines that had these secrets passed down to them through one son to the next son and so on. That's why I think there's something much more sophisticated as to how that knowledge was used in Oak Island, because that just wasn't a bunch of guys getting together saying, let's dig a hole and see how long we can keep people out of it.
No, you're right. And there was something, the chapel vault, chapel, a Freemason, again, he was another one of the searchers at one point. He had a long time association with Oak Island, and when they were drilling down, and when they got so far down, now you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Manny, but they hit concrete first, and then they got into some wood, but they think they knocked it, don't they? They think they kind of knocked it out the way, and it kind of moved it, right?
Yeah, they hit the concrete surface and they had a little bit of wood, but they shifted it, they think. They pushed it over.
And it came back up, the drill bit came back up, it said, with, was it gold on the tip, or?
Yeah, a gold links, chain link, I think it was. Yeah.
And there's even a story about one of the searchers at that time who was on the job that day, inspecting the tip of the drill, and whatever he seen on the end of it, he never ever returned to Nova Scotia again. Now, who knows what they brought up there? Was it a jewel? Was it something? But again, it all adds to the kind of mystery. There's people that say it could be Francis Bacon and things that's hidden stuff down there. And people think, why Francis Bacon? And when you start digging into that, it does make sense. But I think now is a good time. Because we're going all over the place here, and we might even have to do another show on this. What a shame. We'll have to talk about this all again, Scott, right? But how about we look at 12 treasures that could be under Oak Island, and I'll get the guys' thoughts on each of these. So number 1, pirate treasure. The most popular theory claims Oak Island holds the buried treasure of a 17th century pirate named Captain Kidd. Now, according to a local legend, a dying sailor on Kidd's crew claimed that 2 million worth of treasure was buried on the island, and treasure hunters in the 19th century uncovered a large stone from the fabled money pit containing symbolic inscriptions to read, or said to read, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. So then, we've just spoke about the stone. I'll come to you first, Scott. Pirates, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. Like I said, we're talking about a multi-layered level of history on the island, and so on top of the possible Templar, artifact sort of deeper mystery, then you have this entirely different layer of history as well, with pirates traveling to the island. And so yeah, I'm open to that. I think there probably could be pirate treasure on the island.
And I mean, you think
as
about it,
well.
Scott, when the French said to them, "Hey, come have it. Hey, you paretes, you come up here and you make camp, you make island." Right, I went a bit Italian there, right? Don't know how that happened. It was an Italian French guy, but yeah.
Yeah.
So they're all kicking about up there, right? Because people might think, well, why would pirates have been up off the coast of Nova Scotia? Kind of thing. Well, no, they were. You know, there's like precedent for it. The French invited them there. You know.
Yeah. So, yeah,
They would have had, and I don't mean to be, you know, I don't mean to trigger any woke people out there, but they would have had slaves that could have done some of the work. That's a heck of a lot of work, you know?
Yeah.
And to add to that, before I get Manirus' thought on this, and this is where it does get a little bit piratey, intriguing, there's a flood system. You know, it's not called the Curse of Oak Island for nothing. Doesn't matter what people try to do, it always seems to trigger something. Bad luck. Just when they're getting close to something goes wrong. Equipment fails. It's cursed. It truly is, right? But I can't remember what I was going to say there. I was going to get Manirus' thought on something. I had something really good in my head as well, Scott. Something really, really good in my head. But it was about the pirates.
The curse is working already.
The curse is definitely working. I think it just worked on me there. What do you think of the pirates then, dude?
About a curse, you mean?
No, I remember what I was going to say now. I remember what I was
ahead.
going to say, right? So what part of the whole booby trap and the curse thing is a flood system. And there's finger drains that they found back in one of the kind of searching operations that are out in Smith's Cove. Now, these are covered then with what they say was coconut fibers. Now, that added as like a natural kind of filtration system so that the water could get through and go into the drains, nothing would clog it up. And even with the recent show on history, a number of times, and they've gone for scientific testing, they've come up with coconut hair. Now, coconuts ain't growing up in Canada. And the places that would come from, you would have to think maybe are where pirates would have been kicking about. So there's maybe another clue again. What do you think, Manny?
Absolutely. When you think about the pirates, there was a port in, I think it's in the Caribbean, Port Royal.
Yep.
And we have a Port Royal. In fact, I don't. I live a stone's throw away from it. I could throw rocks at it. So the connection of them, you know, the pirates coming up from the Caribbean with their booty, and then camping out here in Nova Scotia on an island, and they use what they're familiar with, coconut fiber, because it was the thing they used in the day for packing.
Yep.
And so it shouldn't be here. And the fact that it's here, and I think they found some coconut fiber in one of the last couple shows where they were dating it back again, and it went way back. So whatever was been going on from the Caribbean right up to where we are, it's been going on for some time. But
And,
yeah, it shouldn't be there.
That Port Royal, the Caribbean one that you mentioned there, really interesting when you start to look into that, because you find that this was like a place where the pirates would go, and it's rumored that there was a shared vault that they built there. And I say a shared vault because there was obviously a number of pirates going there. And now this has never been proven, but there was somebody that said that they had discovered evidence of this shared vault. Hadn't told anyone, probably for obvious reasons. They were probably thinking they might find something. But if that is the case, and even the off chance that you're talking about an engineering operation, that it would have rivaled what we've seen at Oak Island, the use of a kind of crypt, a booby-trapped system as well, so that only the pirate that had access to that part of the vault, he would know the trips to get in there. And then there'd be another entrance for the other ones. They would know how to access it a different way, so they could only get to their bit, so on and so forth, right? Almost like a shared bank vault back in the day. And if that is the case, then you could argue maybe the pirates did have some part to play in Oak Island. But we won't stop there. We're going to race through some of these now. Spanish naval treasure. What do you think of these ones, guys? Because there's been a lot of pegs pins, needles, ironwork that is turned up. And when they take it to the expert, they say this is most definitely could only come from sailing ships and things like that. And
Yeah, didn't they also? I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they find like Spanish coins on the island as well? And so, I mean,
yep.
once again, I mean, I think there's just multi layers to this. That's a possibility as well. You know, it'd be crazy. You know, it'd be absolutely insane if like everything was on the island. Just every freaking thing was
Yeah.
ended up on that island at some point. You know.
You got
And to top it off, Sir Francis Bacon, his manuscripts are there because everything's better with bacon.
Wow, it certainly is. But you're right,
Yeah.
that's one of the options. And some people
Yeah.
have suggested Sir Francis Bacon, 16th century author, was actually the man behind the works of Shakespeare. Evidence from a piece of parchment paper uncovered from within the money pit has given rise to the theory of Bacon's original manuscripts lie under Oak Island. Now, he's a really interesting character. Really interesting because he was a mathematician and he ended up basically holding court with the royals at the time. Ended up their astronomer. Has ties to the infamous John Dee, who was a master magician in the day. So that's one of the other ones that they say is a Bacon stuff there. And to add weight to that theory, they've brought up parchment, bits of leather, almost like the binding for books, out of the money pit over 100 foot down. Now, how on earth's name, if you think nothing happened on Oak Island, the bits of a book get 100 feet below the ground, and when you're starting to try and date them, you're taking us back to these kind of either the 1700s or even sometimes back further, medieval times. There's something really big going on there, guys, isn't there, Manny?
And the bindings or the material for the bindings and the books wasn't just like, this is my copy of my, latest nonfiction. It was actually dyed with a color that was synonymous with royalty. It was a deep purple or, royal purple. So whatever that book was, the pieces they found, it had to be something of some import. It wouldn't have been just, like I said, somebody's collection of reading material. It was something important. So what's it doing in Oak Island?
Exactly. And then you have the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. It says religious military order known as Whistles, Johnny Whistles, Knights Templar, amassed a great treasure said to contain the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. And with Templar symbolism discovered on the island, including the cross or the ankh formation of rocks, there might be some that believe Oak Island came the final resting place of a Templar treasure. Or did they, in fact, maybe hear about something earlier that they went to uncover? Because next up is the Vikings. One theory suggests that the money pit is actually a Viking ship, sucked in by the quicksand, like surfaces on Oak Island, and turned vertically during the sinking process. The wooden planks separated at regular intervals in the pit would be explained as backrests for the rowers. Now, I'm not buying that whole that it was backrests for rowers. Now, is that a good way to throw people off the Viking scent, guys, to make it ridiculous?
Could be. Wouldn't be the first time they do stuff like that.
Scott, what do you think, man?
I don't know about that because even if it was a Viking ship that somehow got turned vertically, how would that explain the booby traps?
Yeah, I'm not buying that one.
Yeah.
So I'm saying
Nah.
they've almost made it so ridiculous that you dismiss the Vikings then, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I was about to say, but that doesn't discount the fact that the Vikings probably were there and that there was Viking activity on the island. But the whole thing of the money pit actually being a Viking ship, nah, I'm not buying that one.
And we've got
Whoever did it
on
had
you
to be something.
on you go,
Go ahead,
Manny.
sir. I was just going to say, when you look at these theories, you have to always bring in the idea whoever did it had to have a really good knowledge of mathematics, geometry, all that stuff. And I didn't see the Vikings being.
You know, when you
part of
look at
that.
the French fort that they built, there's one of the episodes where they go and look at the drain system there. It certainly shows that the French engineers at the time would have been capable of doing the kind of thing we've seen at Oak Island, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yes,
Big
yeah.
time. And it says here, Marie Antoinette's jewels. Now, during the French Revolution of the 1700s, it is said that Marie Antoinette instructed her lady-in-waiting to take her jewels and flee. Most of those jewels have been missing ever since. Some believe the maid fled to Nova Scotia with the help of her royal connections and aided by the French Navy, constructed the money pit as an elaborate vault to house the jewels. You know, I don't... For me, it's too elaborate for jewels, eh? Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's too much has gone on there for mere jewels. But we could be wrong.
And I mean, look, the money pit is much older than the 1700s, so
Yeah,
I
Yep.
think
exactly.
that completely throws that out of the
Yep.
that whole thing. Now,
Then we've got money from Fort Louisbourg. Fort Louisbourg was a Nova Scotian French fort which was surrendered to the British after a siege in the mid-18th century. The money pit on Oak Island is said to be French and naval in style. Therefore, certain researchers have argued it contains monies from the fort smuggled out before it fell to the British. Now, that could very much be the case, and could that be maybe what even McGinnis found? Maybe that's the three chests, you know?
You never know. One thing I do appreciate with the connection is that if, in fact, like Gary likes to say on the show, it's the Templars, baby. The fact that the French Templars, they would have had the same working knowledge of, construction that was used in Louisbourg. So that brings in the connection, the French connection again, and the know-how, because again, the Templars would have had some of that knowledge.
Yep, big time. British Imperial treasures. I'm not going for that one, but they have found like buttons of British uniforms there that date back then. But of course, with them fighting the French, at Fort Louisbourg, I mean, they've got reason to be there in the first place. Doesn't necessarily mean they've actually got anything to do with the treasure story. I just see them as being somebody else who maybe used that place, maybe camped there. It would have been a good place to set up and hide off, just offshore before maybe moving on land. And Freemason artifacts it gets into, the discovery of Masonic markings, symbols, artifacts from around and within the money pit have given rise to a theory that it is in fact a Masonic secret vault created by the Freemasons. Now, a very infamous American Freemason, I believe it was FDR, went on to be president at one point. He spent a summer at Oak Island, didn't he?
Yes, yeah, he did.
And do you know that when he was in office, he even wrote on Oval Office, headed paper, asking one of the people involved at the money pit search at the time to keep him up to date and to keep him up abreast of everything going on. And he was due to go and visit Oak Island, only I believe it was, what was it, the Second World War would have been kind of breaking out that time when he was in office. Something happened anyway, and he couldn't make it, but he had sent a letter to Oak Island apologising. But he was obviously, he got the Oak Island bug, Manny, didn't he?
But yeah, he was into it. He really wanted to know what the deal was. And again, if he had any knowledge of the Masonic connection, that would have been the drive to want to know what's happening.
And number 11 here, interesting. Or number 10, an ancient Coptic pit. It says some have argued the symbols on the stone from the money pit were similar to the Coptic alphabet, and when translated spoke of strict Christian religious practices. This led to the theory of Coptic Christians from Egypt came to Oak Island. So could it be the Ankh then, that cross that we looked at? A tar kiln. It suggested that Oak Island was once a tar making location as part of the British Navy. Now, there's a lot of blue clay there, and a lot of the tools that have been found are synonymous with tunnelling and mining. Now, I get it. You have to tunnel, you have to mine to make the money pit, but could there have been mining of blue clay? Could something else have been going on? Or is it a sinkhole? Or is it, as some suggest, the longest case of mass hysteria that the world has ever experienced? Join us after the break. We're going to brainstorm more of this with Manny, Scott, and me on The Kev Baker Show on TFRlive.com. This may well have been one of the quickest shows I think we've ever done.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's gone by so quick.
Yep. So what I'm going to do after the break is I'm just going to hand it to you guys, and you can take it wherever you want. I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to have my coffee. I'm going to bask in the Oak Island glory. This has been great, guys. I hope for the audience's sake, and I will take full responsibility for the whistle stop tour of all of, or not even some of the highlights, a few of the highlights that I hope have whetted your appetite to go digging for more information on this. I know a few people before the show started had said, you know what, I'm really going to have to watch Oak Island. And I would like to think today's job, if we think of it that way, it might have inspired more to go looking. And I'm sure if you're into the woo, if you're into the mysteries, as you must be if you're hanging out here with me and the guys, I think Oak Island's going to tick a few good boxes for people out there. And tomorrow on the show, we're going to be joined by another one of the Kev Baker Show listeners and supporters, somebody who I've been in touch with for a good while now. She's called into the show. Her name's Billy Joe. We all know her from the chat room. She's one of our mods here. And she's going to be coming on to talk about another show on the History Channel. And synchronistically enough, it's produced by Kevin Burns. And Kevin Burns is the dude that produces Oak Island. So we're going to be talking about the secrets of Skinwalker Ranch tomorrow. And instead of the voiceover saying, there's an island in the North Atlantic, what it says on Skinwalker, and my son called it, he called it right away, Scott. He said, if this is the same team, that voiceover guy better not come on saying, there's a ranch. Oh, and it does. There's a ranch in northern Utah.
Yeah.
Do you watch that yourself, Manny? Have you been watching that one, man?
No, I have not watched that one yet. But I will check it out.
Oh, anyone out there who hasn't watched that, you just must. And we've got a super chat coming in here. Yes, indeed. Just a guy. You are a legend, brother. You are. But have you enjoyed this so far, Manirus?
Yeah, it's been fun. Enjoyed it a lot.
Manirus, you're doing awesome, brother. Good knowledge. Puff puff pass to the left already.
Oh, PPP. Yes, indeed. We'll be going back to the network in just a moment. But Scott, has it been as good for you as it has for me?
Yes, it has.
Plunge
I'm going to
in the
need a
depths.
cigarette after this.
Yes.
You can spend a whole show just on one theory.
You
It's
could. You
amazing.
really could. That's why I think, I think we'll definitely have to get back together. And
Oh, we'll have to get into a theory that you brought up, Kev, the other day that we haven't touched on yet, and I'll surprise everyone with it.
All right.
Whenever we get back.
All right, we'll do that. Well, now you're going to surprise me because I know what we were talking about it. So I'll be reminded when you tell me. We'll be good. We'll be good to go, man. We'll be good.
Yeah.
A big shout out to everyone in the chat room. Honestly, thank you all for being here. And there wasn't an earlier stream today because, again, I've been down this rabbit hole for a good few hours. I even had to say to my good friend Bill Bean, Bill, I am in Oak Island mode right now. I've got the blinkers on. I was there, Scott. I was in the zone, man. It was good going, it was. But here we go. We're going back to the network. Okay, if I can... Yes, there we go. Skype has now decided to work again. Here we are. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I really can't believe this. I say it a lot, but tonight, more so than ever, final segment already of the Kev Baker Show with our special guest all the way from Oak Island. The man with a name synonymous with Oak Island, but we know him as Manny, and he's the man of many gnomes. He's here with us tonight, our special guest. And I've got my co-host riding shotgun, is Scotty Lopez. And Scott, Saying to you during the break, I mean, has it been as good for you as it has for me, man? This is almost, I mean, this has almost been like an information orgy. Very enjoyable indeed.
Yes, Kev. Like I said, I'm gonna need a cigarette after this. Um,
Now, Scott,
but
you were saying during the break, you were going to bring up something I was talking about the other day. Go for it, man.
yeah, you brought up an interesting little theory the other day about Oak Island, and we haven't touched upon it yet. You were talking about a possible Aztec or Inca connection as well, and that there's a little theory out there about that. Um, that could be, Montezuma's gold. Um,
Yep, I think that's the actual. I think that's the treasures involved in that theory. I'm just gonna dig it up because it's Randall Sullivan. His book, absolutely fantastic. It actually runs in conjunction with the series, The Curse of Oak Island, so he got full access and everything like that. And he brings up that theory. Now, it might sound a bit outlandish, a bit out there. You know, Mayans and Aztecs and things, not exactly known as your sea-bearing sailors or anything like that. But master
yeah,
miners and master builders, Scott, right?
exactly. I mean, the Aztecs and the Incas built some pretty, incredible things. They were very good at engineering, and I mean now we're also got to talk about maybe some of this history that we're being taught in school is not the what really occurred, right? Um, for example, we talk about the Olmecs, and Christopher Everard has you know written in his book about, look, it looks like the Olmecs were a sea-bearing uh you know civilization, group of people, and that they were possibly trading and traveling all the way to Egypt, right? Because they've found traces of cocaine in some of these mummies, and where are they getting that from? Well, I mean that coca leaf is not native to the Middle East. It has to come from South America. So that would suggest that there was trade going on between South America and the Middle East, And so I've always ascribed to the belief that the Incas and the Aztecs traveled much farther north as well. That they weren't just locked into that specific area of Central and South America. I believe that they traveled and moved in a much larger geographical area. So, I mean, could there have been traces of them up all the way up into Nova Scotia and Oak Island? I mean, who knows? But even then, maybe Spanish, Montezuma's gold, they got a hold of that and wanted to protect it somehow, or um, some of this stuff. So I think that's also another interesting angle to look at when it comes to this as well. We talk about artifacts and stuff being transported from Europe over there, but maybe we're talking about some kind of a treasure from the Aztecs or the Incas that may be located up there as well.
Yeah, it could be. And just bring this up here. I've got a quick blurb about that. It says it's well established by history that the peoples of Americas possessed vast amounts of gold and silver and used it for all manner of purposes. It would seem, however, that their fascination with these precious metals, in terms of monetary value, did not compare by any measure with that of the Spanish who sought to retrieve it. Another theory is that Oak Island became a depository for the Spanish conquerors of the New World, And the treasures buried belonged to the Incans, the Mayans, or the Aztecs. Now, if the treasure did arrive to the island from the South American location, it would help to explain the vast amount of coconut fibers present in the money pit. Now, I'm not sure if this actually gets into the... It's not the theory that I was talking about, but it talks about the Aztec and the Mayan treasures being there. But in that book, like I was talking about, by Randall Sullivan, he gets into it, and I guess it's more of a kind of... it's not one of your more commonly held theories, but somebody wrote it back in the day. I think they themselves were a miner at one point who had worked on Oak Island, and they had put together their theory, their book, on the back of that. Now, hey, I'm not saying they're wrong, because, as we've uncovered tonight, there's more questions than answers. And Manny, this is why I'm going to come to you, because me and Scott, we do Freaky Friday all the time, right? We've covered a bajillion topics, and you would think we should know more about the topics we cover than we did when we started. But I don't like speaking for Scott, but I think we probably know less now, because we've uncovered some stuff that raised more questions than answers. And does it not feel like that on Oak Island? Every season, sure, we get new finds, we get new discoveries that certainly whet the appetite and keep the search going. But, again, you get these kind of anomalies, like the swamp may have been made in the 1200s. You've got things that date back to medieval times, just totally out of place things that leave the whole team, the audience, and the world with more questions than answers.
Absolutely. It never ends. I mean, and it's a good thing, because just when you think you're getting a handle on what you think you understand about Oak Island, a new thing pops up, and it kind of re-whets your appetite to keep, looking for more. And that's why I think next season, if they decide to go the big dig idea that they've talked about at the end of this last season, it's going to be really exciting to see A, what they find, B, how they find it. And the other part that I mentioned just briefly is just how everything feels, because they talk about it in the show sometimes about the curse of Oak Island and the esoteric nature of certain things that's happened, strange goings on. I'm wondering just how that's going to play out next season as well. So it's great.
I mean, to give people an idea, you've had hundreds of, literally a couple of 100 years of searching going on. And I had a timeline up earlier on, and, you can go through that timeline and you'll find all of the various teams and companies and people that have been involved with searching there. And near enough all of them have made an attempt at the money pit. Now, what that's done over the years, and I don't need to be an engineer or anything to work this out, but when you're like digging or drilling over 100-foot holes into quite a small area of land, and it stands to reason that over time, the ground beneath you, it's going to be like Swiss cheese, and all the way down you're coming across the timbers that have been used in all of these previous searches, all the way through the 1800s, all the way through the 1900s, and now they're having to get through all the previous shafts that have been done. They're having to get through all the work that's gone previously, and it's so insane, to the point now where they've had to think of something entirely new. And I think this might, once and for all, get us to the bottom of the story and the bottom of the money pit all in one go. Because what they're going to do is they're going to excavate pretty much the whole area. You can think of one of these kind of strip mining operations where you see the kind of going down. But what they're doing is they're either going to use liquid nitrogen to freeze. I think it's an 80-foot radius hole, is it, Manny?
It's big. It's
huge, right? And they'll take maybe 5-10 feet out at a time, and then they're going to reinforce that big kind of hole with concrete,
Essentially, you have to think of it as they're basically taking a gigantic core sample, is what they're doing.
Like a massive missile silo or something,
Exactly.
Yeah, they're they're going to kind of dig around it in order to just go down and be able to access it without worrying about like these flood traps or anything interfering with it. So it's kind of all contained within its own little, ecosystem or something. So that's a massive engineering feat that they're going to have to overcome. But
Tens
like
of
I said,
millions, Scott. Tens of millions.
yeah, but like you said, it may finally, they may finally be able to get to the bottom of it, and we'll finally get some answers and solve this mystery.
Yep. And
We shall see.
there's people asking how to get its name, and it had oak trees on it, and it was an island of oak trees. And just towards the end of this season, again, it got more mysterious because they called back some of the people who were a big part of this story, and it was the Westals. It was a mother and father and a family that went there to search. Robert Westall, I think his name is. Is that his name? Can you remember?
Restal? Is that
Sorry?
It's the Restal is the one that was
Restal.
the Daredevils. I'm probably saying his name wrong.
Yeah, they were the daredevils that went there, and it says here in 1965 it was a tragic accident because first it was Robert. I think Restal went down the shaft. Something had happened. There was gases getting released.
Yeah.
He had passed out. So the son then, he went down to try and save him. He was overcome by the fumes, and then 2 other people were overcome by the fumes, and I think 4 or 5 people lost their lives that day. And the son and the daughter that survived, they came back to the island just there in the last season. And what she brought with her was what her father had pulled out of the actual finger drains when they were initially searching. It was really interesting because on the island at the time, there was these really out of place, massive oak trees. There was one on one of the bays, and I believe there was one somewhere else. But these things stood maybe, for argument's sake, say 50, 100 foot higher than the other trees around there. It was noticeably higher. Now,
Yeah, we had some massive oak trees back then. Massive. Yeah.
And if I remember rightly, did she not pull out a dried leaf and an acorn that she had?
Yeah.
And they got a botanist in. And what's really interesting about this type of oak tree is it's not native to Nova Scotia. In fact, it's native to Portugal. So you could say, well, maybe something washed over from Portugal. Well, it goes against the current and everything else, but let's not let facts get in the way of that. And was it put there, was it planted there then as a marker for somebody to come in the future? Look out for the island with a big, massive, crazy tree on it. I don't know, but again, it's left with more questions, more investigations to do, instead of us getting closer to answering it. But what I'm going to do now is, I'm going to shut up, and it's hard for me because I'm so super excited with this show, but I'm going to let Scott and Manny get into whatever they want about Oak Island for the last 10 or so minutes here. So Scott, I'm going to hand it to you, man, and you take it away with Manny. Go where you want. I'm going to sit here.
Yeah, you lead, I follow.
Okay. Well, I think another interesting thing is I believe they found bones down there, and they said that one of them was of Arab descent.
Yeah, Middle Eastern. Yeah.
Middle Eastern descent. Yeah. So there you go again. I think that also lends a little more evidence towards the whole Templar.
Yes, exactly. Because where did the Templars go? They went to the Middle East for the Crusades. Yep. There's your connection. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's just so much stuff. I don't even know like where to go with this. Really, there's like all of this evidence, this multi-layered historical evidence that it's hard to kind of pinpoint one thing. It's like you said, Manny. I mean, you could dedicate an entire show to just one theory. It's
easy.
that much it's that much of an enigma. It's that much of a mystery that's going on Oak Island that, you know, uh, and I think also a lot of like I think parts of the money pit were repurposed by many different groups that came across it and saw that there was previous activity there. And, let's be honest. I mean, what are you going to do when you come across infrastructure that's already there? You're going to utilize it. Why aren't you going? Why would you put the effort into building something from scratch when you've come across something that was already built? So I think some of these theories of like when Kev was going through a lot of these theories where they're like, oh, the British, it may be the British used it for this, or the French used it for that, or it was used by this group or that group. Yeah, maybe it was. Maybe it was used by all of them. That maybe they came across this and was like, hey, look, there's this thing that's already here that we can repurpose or use for whatever we need it for, because it already has, we already have the infrastructure there. And so maybe that is the case. Maybe it's all of it,
It's true.
So yeah.
I mean, just
that-
look at the idea of the 90-foot stone, because that always just boggles my mind. That was taken out of there. They knew it had. I mean, you would have hoped they would have think this is important, and it ends up at a business in Halifax, a bookbindery, and they use it to beat leather, to shape leather for books, and you just shake your head and say, if this was now, like we have Mammoth Hunter, her husband and her are archaeologists. It's like going to a dig and finding something of importance and using it in your everyday life as if it's of no consequence.
Yeah, it's like somebody
So
took one of the tea stones from Göbekli Tepe and made like
Yeah.
a pavement
Yeah,
out
use it
of
for their
you know?
patio. Yeah.
Exactly. But
It's
one
like-
of the weirdest things I came across in the book, and I tell you, this is probably even, it was too woo for me. On Audible, you get like a 10-second rewind. I don't think I've ever pressed it as many times as I did in this book about Oak Island. But one of the searches at one point, they dug up some really, really old wood. And anyone who watches the current season, you'll know that some of the older wood, it's black, it's stinky, it's been down there a while, but it's still preserved. And I'm not sure of the date that this happened, but I would imagine 1900s because it went for scientific testing. And when the date came back of when this piece of wood was meant to have been sawn and hand hewn and everything else and cut to size, the date that came back was something like 2600 AD. Now, the reason I had to pause and go back, and I didn't even make it into the explanation, is because 2600 AD hasn't been yet. And I kept rewinding, I'm thinking, hang on now. But what it turned out to be was that there was a technique back in the day, way back in the day, of trying to preserve wood. And I can't remember the exact name of it. It's either uranite or uraniite. It's obviously something to do with uranium. It's got radioactive kind of qualities to it. And this is what threw off the carbon dating procedure. And it was like a false positive type thing. It was an anomaly, but only because of some of the chemicals that had been used on the wood. Now, tell me that isn't woo.
So it wasn't the Marty McFly dating technique. But
Either that, right, or somebody in the future. They've looked back. They've already listened to this show. They've actually dug it in the year 2600 on their timeline. We've merged timelines. It's all back to front now. And part of me even wonders if maybe it's not a treasure. What if you build something? The only other thing you can think of where you would go to such great lengths to keep people away from something would be if it's something that you have a really strong belief in that is inherently evil or dangerous? Could it be that the Templars maybe found something that would really rewrite history as we know it when they were over in Jerusalem? Could they potentially have found something that might have scuppered the story that is the backbone of what we call Christianity?
Sure.
Could it be something that important that they thought nobody can ever get to see this, but something they couldn't destroy? I don't know. It's weird, right? I need more. Sorry, Manny. What were you saying there, man?
No, I said, no, absolutely. I mean, whatever, again, it all comes down to the effort and the amount of intelligence behind what's there and why it was put there. It has to be more than just gold trinkets and emeralds and that sort of thing. And nothing drives people more than, and we see it in history. I mean, people fight over their belief systems and they're willing to die for them. So if it was something of that kind of discovery, if they discovered something that would shake the very foundations of, say, a belief system, yeah, why not?
It does make you wonder. It does make you wonder, doesn't it? But I'll give you guys the last word on what you think, is beneath the surface. Scotty, I'll let you go, and then we'll let the McGinnis give his take. I think it's only fair if McGinnis takes the show out,
Yes. No, I think I've cracked the mystery, Kev. I think I know what's going to be found at the bottom.
Wait a minute.
How dare you?
Spoiler alert, what is it, man?
See, this carbon dating thing, this is all a ruse. It really was from the future, and when we get to the bottom, we're gonna find a thumb drive.
Yeah.
We're gonna find a
D-Wave.
We're gonna find a thumb drive, and you know what's gonna be loaded on that thumb drive, Kev? Every episode of KBS.
And Oak Island.
I was feeling deja vu.
I tell you, Manny, at one point I thought myself as well, I was, it was when we were working with Max Egan. He had just gone through that episode. We were talking about two different realities, timelines, cycles, maybe a 100-year loop that we're stuck in. And at one point I started thinking, maybe if we are in a 100-year loop, when they get to the bottom, they're going to find a note to themselves saying, "Give up, guys, you've been here before,"
Yeah. Get ready for take 2.
Dude, but you are the man that has a link to this story. What would you like to say to wrap up your what has been a brilliant visit, brother? Thank you so much.
I
I've
appreciate you
enjoyed
having
this
me on.
thoroughly. I really have.
I just hope whatever they find when they find it is something that makes us all feel that it was worth it. The fact that it's going to rewrite history, I mean, that's exciting enough. But I think whatever it is they do find is going to be something huge, because I don't think, like I said this repeatedly, I don't think they dug that hole or that whole system just for some gold trinkets. So if whatever's down there has survived the hundreds and hundreds of years that we suspect it's been there, it should be well worth the wait to find out what it is. So
Couldn't have said anything any better myself. Scott, have you enjoyed this? I have.
Oh man, this was good stuff, man. Oak Island is it's just it provides a plethora of woo and mystery, and it continues. That's the thing, is that it seems like each season and the more excavating and digging and the things that they find there, like you said, it ends up
We need to do another show. I didn't even get into the map that I had.
I know so much.
it just ends up, you have more questions than answers. And I think that's what the allure, and what keeps driving people to want to figure out what's going on there.
Well, we are out of time. And for me, this place is up there with the Bermuda Triangle, Göbekli Tepe, and all of the topics that I love to get into. Hope you've enjoyed tonight. Hope we've really set a fire within you. You know, I really want to inspire people to do their own digging for just what was going on Oak Island, the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, the how. And I'm going to try my hardest to get one of the McGinnis onto this show. So I'll be back tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. There we go. Yes, I'd been thinking about this today. I got all excited and I was watching bits and I was doing research for it, and I thought, well, after we get tonight's show out the way, with us now had the season finale and the hiatus, I think it would be a good time to at least reach out to the team. If I can't get the McGinnis, I'd love to get Jack Begley on. He's the guy with the beard. He's right into it, man. If he needs to dig our things, he's right in there. Anyone from that team, I want to explore this further. I think it's one of these topics, Scott, we need to come back to because we love it, man.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yep.
Not to be confused with another Begley. We're not having him on.
Hang on now. Wait a minute.
Are you serious?
Hey.
Are you serious, guys?
That could have gone horribly wrong. That could have been Derek Akora talking about Mary and Richard again. But it didn't go wrong. It's been a blast. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you haven't watched the TV show, The Curse of Oak Island, obviously I'm going to highly recommend it. I want to thank Manny for joining us tonight, for sharing his, family story, for being brave enough to admit to being one of those pesky Masons that's set to take over the world. I'm only joking, Manny. We were joking about this before the show. Yeah. And some people do think the Masons have got some agenda to take over the world. And for me personally, I know a few Masons, and I'm not including you, Frank, stepdad excluded. But the Masons I do know, if they've got any overarching plans and agenda to take over the world on the quiet, I'd be very, very surprised. Because the Masons I know, some of them would struggle to kind of organise a piss up in a brewery. They really would. So I don't think we've got too much to worry from that lower kind of levels. Yeah. But what do you make of it, dude, being a Mason, when you hear some of the kind of more conspiratorial type stuff coming out?
I laugh because when I first was looking at getting involved with the Masons, I did the research too, and you run across all this stuff on the internet and such. And I just jokingly tell people, since I became a Mason, I found out who shot JFK and where Jimmy Hoffa is buried. That usually ends it right there.
That's what we're talking about, Scott, right? That's what we're talking about, man. And we would ask Manny to elaborate, but he would have to kill us if he told us. So
there
we can't go there.
That's it.
all I got to say is that Manny is going to, just expect a strongly worded letter coming from Lothar in the chat.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, big time. And, on the Freemasons, now, again, this was right up there with the kind of more obscure theories. But one suggested that the characters involved, McGinnis, Vaughn, Smith, they were actually just made up. And it was all just to fit a Masonic story.
Yes, I read that.
You read that as well? Yeah, it was almost like playing out one of the Masonic levels, the initiations. I mean, I don't give that any...
The Royal Arch degree. It was a Royal Arch degree, yeah.
See, Scott, I did that. I did do the deep dive on this today, you see? I'm telling you, man. But no, personally, I think that's highly speculative. I mean, here we are talking to somebody from the family. The family spoke about it. It's lore. We know what we do with lore on this show. It's as good as fact. It truly, truly is, because I think it's far too elaborate a story to have been made up and then, doesn't really explain the works in the first place. So, with that said, again, Billy Joe tomorrow night, Skinwalker Ranch. It's going to be more good woo. And then on Thursday, it's turned into a real paranormal fest because Bill Bean is going to be coming on. But I've also got a husband and wife couple coming on to share their very, very strange paranormal experiences as well. Oh, Scott, you're making that face. Indeed, sir. Thursday is going to take the KBS. It's the final KBS of the week before Freaky Friday. And Scott, oh, it's shaping up to be a dang good one, man.
Sounds like a woo-filled week for Mr. Baker.
So,
Yes.
Manny, before we go, I mean, Oak Island goes without saying, but what are the topics that you love to hear the Kev Baker show get into? What is it when you think, we're getting into this tonight? What do you really like, man?
I enjoy the esoteric, more esoteric shows when you get into the shadow people and curses of certain areas, or just ghosts and spirits and all that stuff. I get a kick out of that. I enjoy hearing everybody's input on it.
I enjoy doing those shows the most, and I think for that reason, we'll certainly cover big events and things, but look at this fun we've had tonight, Scott. We've been like sat there hanging on words, and this is great. And you find topics like these, like the woo, as opposed to current events, not so divisive. And I'm more about bringing people together, us having a good time, us feeling a little bit better after.
It lightens things up. It lightens things up for people.
There's enough heaviness in the world without some 5'2" Glaswegian idiot adding to all of it. So I'll take people into the woo. And if people want to say, well, Kev Baker, you just distract people, I will say thank you. I'll say that's exactly.
It's all good.
Yes, my job. Because I know that the people listen to this show, you're all responsible adults, and you are very, very keen researchers, and in many times way more clued up than me, any of the guests I bring on here. So I know that you're all doing your own research anyway. And yeah, it's good to hear my commentary, my opinion from time to time. But I think this is where the heart of the Kev Baker show lies, in the woo, indeed. So until next time, I want to bid you all farewell. I'll give you one last blast of the unofficial Queen of Europe.
How dare you?
And of course, probably a candidate for the next Pope.
Are you serious?
Maybe not, maybe not.
Are you serious?
But until next time, folks, you know what's coming. Keep your mind open. Keep looking for the woo, but not to the point where your brain turns to black goo.